Live now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, hope you folks can hear me. This is Tom Hughes. I'm the Natural Hazard Mitigation Association Vice President and State Hazard Mitigation Officer with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management since 2009. I've been with NHMA since 2015. I will do the presenters introductions after I have a few slides. I know that some of you may be new to NHMA. I want to cover some things about our organization. It should be stated that NHMA presentations are based on general practice of law, engineering, policy, and emergency management. And this is this offering today is our second installation of our webinar series that has been paid for through FEMA CTP funds. And we did get a lot of feedback from our first webinar last month. Some of the topics you want to see are expediting disaster recovery funding, nature-based solutions, BCAs, BRIC, case studies, and some information on public assistance and the use of 406 HM dollars. Okay, the organization was created in 2008 to brought together individuals and organizations interested in hazard mitigation and climate adaptation. NHMA has a vertical integration in alignment with the national policy or the National Resilience Framework. NHMA promotes good, thoughtful development that does not harm people and property, and that disaster risk reduction will take place or not take place based on local decisions. NHMA is a cooperating technical partner, as I had mentioned. We've been very engaged with our FEMA partners and other stakeholders. NHMA is an informed and effective grassroots organization. We solicit community participation and innovative partnerships. And we are currently working on and reviewing our process with university partners to look at credentialing. And one of those includes Clemson University. So NHMA is a recipient of this CTP grant through the Federal Emergency Management in support of the Resilience Neighbors Network, or RNN, if you have not heard of that organization, and education and training for communities. So we work through local initiatives, first being the Resilience Neighbors Network, with a number of communities that have come together monthly and network. And then through our disaster risk reduction curriculum. And also we have a great resource, building a roadmap, formerly the Patchwork Quilt document. It's posted on our NHMA website. And we also do finally through outreach, do outreach to traditional and non-traditional partners. This disaster risk reduction curriculum is a flagship of the FEMA funded CTP that we receive. NHMA has partnered with state floodplain managers and other sponsors in previous peer-to-peer workshops, which are constantly changing to meet the needs of those communities. Each workshop focuses on building local capabilities and capacities with continued training, planning, and networking. And the emphasis is placed on the concept of disaster resilience, or the ability to prepare and plan for, absorb, recover from, and more successfully adapt to adverse events. The curriculum provides citizens, leaders with best practices and the science underlying or understanding of natural hazards phenomenon. You'll see there's a photo here posted. This is actually a recent Montana workshop that was delivered by NHMA. I mentioned that we already had our first webinar in April. And next up, we have Dr. Keith Porter and our own NHMA Ed Thomas, who is now our President Emeritus with NHMA. And so they will be looking at understanding the financial and human cost of earthquake risk. So I would invite you to sign up for that once we complete this webinar. So our first presentation today is going to be from Dale Thomure. That will be on the BCEGS, the Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule. And the second, it should be part 3, will be given by John Ingargiola regarding the building code and mutual aid that's now available through the Disaster Recovery Reform Act. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And also they do have a computer program that they want to show you live. So with that, First up is Dale Thomure. He is the manager of community hazard mitigation at ISO, a Veristick business. And in this capacity, he is responsible for the implementation of the BCEGS in North America. Prior to his tenure at ISO, Mr. Thomure worked for nearly 20 years in municipal government management, having responsibilities for community development, public works, and building code administration. And then after he has done his slides, we'll have John Ingargiola. He's the lead physical scientist with the Building Science Branch Risk Management Directorate of FEMA, responsible for a broad range of activities of national scope, including building sciences, codes, and standards, mitigation guides, training policy development, program and regulatory analysis and coordination with public and private sectors. And will be co-presented with Zach Corcoran. He manages and leads development on multiple lines of FEMA building code adoption tracking products and the research underlying them, including, as they call it, BCAT fact sheets, mutual aid for building departments fact sheets, and BCAT web GIS portal, and the BCAT quarterly updates. And he he's a project manager with STARR 2. So with that, go ahead, Dale.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate the intro, and welcome everyone to the presentation. Thanks to NHMA for inviting us to speak real briefly with you about our products and programs that deal with building codes. And let me make sure there we go. We're gonna get technology working here. So just by way of introduction, and to let you know sort of who we are and what we do, and kind of why we have some of the insights that we do that we're going to share with you here at ISO. As a company, ISO is part of a larger company called Verisk. Verisk is one of the leading suppliers of statistical and actuarial data to the property casualty insurance industry in the US. And Verisk is a global company dealing with many sectors across the globe in insurance risk, finance, petrochemical installations. And we provide a great deal of advisory services to P&C insurers, and we have a number of class and rating programs that are available and that are administered here in the US. And one of them we'll talk about today. But if you're a state hazard mitigation officer or a hazard mitigation officer or a hazard planner, there are some ISO programs that you may have heard of, at least in passing. And so there are three basic community mitigation related programs that we administer in the US. The first one is our fire suppression rating schedule, which is the ISO public protection class program. That's the evaluation of local fire protection capabilities across the country. This is the oldest of our community mitigation programs, and probably the most well-known across the country. This gives basically a classification to every fire department based on the readiness and response capabilities. The program we're going to talk more about today, the Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule, or BCEGS, is about 25 years old, and we'll get into it. But also, this is not ISO program. FEMA's or an NFIP's Community Rating System program is administered by ISO staff. So we include that under one of our mitigation programs because we work so closely with community officials on that. And there is interconnectivity between the Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule and the CRS program. And so that's sort of the atmosphere in which we work here at ISO. All of our products are designed for utilization by insurance carriers and insurance underwriters, but a great amount of the data that we collect is shared with FEMA, with my good friend John there at FEMA, and a lot of the products that they use have some of our information in them, or information about your community finds its way there. So we wanted to share a little bit about this program, understanding that, you know, state hazard mitigation officers and mitigation planners may not be as familiar with this as they might ought to be. So what is BCEGS? Like I said, it's an insurance rating program that was designed in the early 1990s to aid insurance companies in understanding risks associated with building code enforcement. And understanding that not all building code enforcement efforts are created equal, not all building codes are created equal, and we were tasked with the role of developing a rating program that would help insurers predominantly understand what risks are associated at a community level with the degree of building code enforcement that goes on there. And we administer this across the U.S. in 45 states. The other 5 states that are insurance rating bureau states also use this particular program, but it's administered by those insurance rating bureaus, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But BCEGS essentially is designed to look at what kind of resources and support are available to a community. So financial resources, human resources, and then also policy resources. You know, intent and will is a resource. And then given the resources the community has, we try to look at how well the community is utilizing those resources. The idea is the most well-funded, well-equipped building department with the strongest building code imaginable isn't as valuable if those resources aren't being applied, right? You can have all the budget in the world, but if you're not spending those dollars on something that create a positive result, your effectiveness is somehow limited. Not to delve too deeply into how we do this, but every jurisdiction in the U.S. Is evaluated by us, whether they have a building department or not. Once every 4 to 5 years, we assign a classification. It's a 1 to 10 system. It's a golf game, so 1 is better than a 10. And those 1 to 10 classifications are used by the insurance industry to understand degree of risk. But with that comes a lot of underlying data that can be utilized for public policy purposes, like BCATs that John and Zach are going to talk about a little bit later. BCEGS has a historic element. So once every 4 to 5 years, we reevaluate a community's enforcement efforts. And those enforcement efforts change over time. They get better, they become more positive, they become less positive, depending on a lot of factors. But we keep a historic database of all of this information so that we can go back through time and look at, you know, trends over time in a local department. And there are about 1,200 pieces of information that are collected from each building code department every 4 to 5 years when we look at this to do BCEGS evaluations. So there's a tremendous amount of data here that can really be used to help inform a lot of policy decisions. So to give you an idea what's in it, you know, like I told my good friend Tom, I said we could do a 4-hour presentation on just what's inside of BCEGS if he ever wanted to do that, but we won't be doing it today. So we actually do look at essentially everything that goes on behind the permit counter in a local building code department when we do these evaluations. So of course we look at what codes are used, what subcodes are used, have they been weakened below the model code standard, what changes have been made. But in addition to just having the code on the books, we want to look at, you know, what is the community doing to enforce the code? So we're going to look at the certifications of their staff, qualifications of the staff. We want to look at workload, work volumes, degree and quality of plan review, for instance. We look at their, oops, sorry guys, hit the mouse. We want to look at whether or not they have zoning and land use. what the detail of their land review might be, what's the detail of their inspection capability. And all of that information is collected and applied to our filed grading schedules, and then we develop the classifications from that. Like I said, the residential and commercial classifications are used by the insurance industry. And then the granular data elements either are used for underwriting purposes by P&C insurers, or some of this granular data finds its way into products like BCATs, and there are a number of others. But it really is a very comprehensive review of the building code department. And the way we look at this is, especially from a BCEGS perspective, when it's applied to insurance loss costs, for instance, it is an indicator of community vulnerability. Okay, so you either have a community. Every community falls on this vulnerability spectrum, right? They have either no building codes, which, I mean, there are vast amounts of the U.S. where building codes are not required. And so a community may or may not have requirements. So we have a weak building code or no building code, for instance. And then you have a community with a modern building code, okay? But that's just the code component. So then we add how effective is their utilization of their enforcement, their enforcement capability. And we weigh all of those things together, and the community will fall somewhere in this vulnerability spectrum. Class 1 is low vulnerability to natural hazards. Class 10 is relatively high vulnerability to natural hazards. So that's essentially the thought process behind the 1 to 10 scale and how we weigh all of these various factors. So, and again, this won't be death by bar chart, promise, but since we have a national audience, we can't really focus on any particular state or region. So I put together, this is the distribution of the classifications of all building code departments in the 45 ISO states. This is the most recent distribution, gives you an idea of where communities fall on the spectrum, right? Again, remembering that one is the least vulnerable and 10 is the most vulnerable. A good percentage of the nation, of the communities in the nation that we have evaluated, fall on the correct side of the chart, if you will. So they fall between a 1 and a 5, and being between 1 and 5 is really important for a couple of reasons that we're going to really talk about a lot today, and John's going to talk about as well. A lot of the programs that are utilizing BCEGS classifications, either for funding or for insurance discounts, focus on this 1 to 5 spectrum. And 2 for today, BRIC, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, it's FEMA's grant program, and then the CRS program. To get additional CRS credit, you've got to be at least a 5 or better. So it's a pretty good story nationally, right? I mean, you have a high percentage of jurisdictions fall in this 1 to 5. If we take this apart state by state or by region or even at a county level, I mean, you're going to get varied results across the country, but not a horrible story to tell. In areas where building codes are enforced and the codes are relatively strong, there's a pretty good job done with enforcement. It's a moving target. It is subject to a lot of the winds of political change affect building codes in many ways, and you will see these classification numbers. They do vary over the course of years, just based on those couple things. Again, other things that you'll see BCEGS classifications built into, which all of these in one way or another wouldn't matter. If I'm a state hazard mitigation officer, why would I care about all these things? Well, BCEGS can really give you an idea of what the pulse is related to public policy in your state related to building code enforcement. And the way it falls into some of these programs really do benefit, the constituent that you would have. So in general, BCEGS is at its heart and its core and its primary purpose is it is an insurance rating and underwriting program. There are filed advisory credits in every state. There are usages of BCEGS in CAT modeling. There's a company called AIR, which is also a Verisk business. One of our sister companies, they do CAT modeling. BCEGS information is utilized there. We do a lot of outreach at the community level with code advocacy operations. That's what we call them. We give every local building code department a very detailed report and a summary of their BCEGS outcomes, and we give them peer comparisons. We also partner with ICC at the national level and provide them some intelligence related to who's adopting which codes. And we also financially support and sponsor ICC to a great extent, as much as possible, to advance code advocacy efforts across the country. Obviously, I'm not going to talk too much about FEMA programs because we have FEMA staff on the call, but the big one right now is the BRIC program. I do have a slide about that. We'll talk about how BCEGS can get you credit on grant applications for BRIC. In the world of resiliency, we partner with a couple organizations. We partner with FLASH, Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, and we help them with their no code, no confidence project that I think John's going to talk some about because that is FEMA funded. But we also assist there in doing some outreach related to resiliency. And that data finds its way to your constituents, and it will help you understand, sort of the state of your state in relation to resiliency. We participate in a number of academic studies related to insurance loss and risk. We have a long-standing relationship with the Risk Decision Processes Center at the University of Pennsylvania, that's part of the Wharton School. They have done a number of studies using BCEGS data as an indicator of resilience or an indicator of performance. And we continue to we always are interested in working with studies to demonstrate the good works and the good impacts of building codes. And then obviously in CRS, we talked about, BCEGS is a key element of CRS. If you're going to get into the higher discount levels, the communities have to have a building code department, and those building code departments have to score pretty well. And the CRS program does provide a considerable amount of direct discount to your constituents on a yearly basis. So it's a very important program. I mentioned AIR just a moment ago, and they do, like I said, CAT modeling and hazard modeling, and their models create essentially loss cost information for insurers. But the three, there are three big ones right now that are utilizing some BCEGS information. Their seismic model, their severe thunderstorm model, and inland flood model all use BCEGS information about what's going on at the local level with building codes, because building code enforcement or lack of building code enforcement really has a significant impact on any of these hazards. And it's interesting, and I think it'd be interesting for you to know how they do that. They actually use the same sort of approach that we would in BCEGS about vulnerability, but they use it to indicate building vulnerability, because we know the efforts or the score of the building code department during a certain point in time when a building was constructed, right? And we know how, let's say in a severe thunderstorm, we know how a building built to code will behave because of science and science and the research behind that. We also have a pretty good idea how buildings that have been built to no code or standard will behave when subjected to certain loads. What we don't know is how will the rest of those buildings in between there respond when faced with one of these hazards. And that's sort of where BCEGS comes in, at least to an extent. It's used as a proxy in the damage assessment module of the models. And we know that they have either elements of good code enforcement in place, or they have no code enforcement in place. And that places the structure on a spectrum of vulnerability, just like normal BCEGS classifications would. Essentially, we look at the enforcement metrics that are in BCEGS divorced from the code requirements, and we can place a particular structure in a vulnerability spectrum that way. Like I said, we give every jurisdiction, and this will be of keen interest to every state hazard mitigation officer on the call. Every jurisdiction that has a building code department gets what we call a benchmark report every 4 to 5 years from us. And what this does is it takes their particular information. Tom, I know you've seen a couple of these because we've talked about a couple of these in Pennsylvania just recently. It takes the community information, and then we give them peer comparisons to communities at the county level, state level, and nationally that are similar to the jurisdiction being graded. We do this for 2 reasons. One, we have all the data in our databases from 25 years of working with communities. We have amassed a large amount of information, and we try to share this to promote good public policy. Secondly, we do it because there's interest at the local level, right? In my prior life, I worked in municipal government, and I was in city management, and there's always the question we had, right, was, well, how do we compare to our peers, right? And so we have information that we put out, and we give this to the communities. And it's very detailed, and it pulls information from a number of ISO programs and puts it all into one spot for the community. We're not going to go into these studies, but I mentioned before we do a lot of work with the Wharton School. There are a number of studies out there, and 2 notable ones. There is a study of hail losses from Missouri over a period of time that is very interesting, and I think is appropriate to this audience to take a look at. And there is also a study of wind-driven losses in Florida when compared with this, because Florida has a mandatory statewide building code. There was a study done by the Wharton School that looked at loss impacts from that, and I think those are both very very relevant to this audience, that you might want to take a look at those. And then we participate with a number of things with FEMA programs, and I'm not going to cover that because John's going to talk about that in his presentation. John and I are not often on the same presentation panels, so we try not to duplicate each other's stuff. So you have to forgive us if we do that a little bit. And again, there are a couple FEMA programs that I want to mention, because I told John I would put these in ours so we could draw some comparisons. If your community does get a disaster declaration, there is the ability to take some of the dollars in your declaration and use those to adopt disaster resistant building codes or improve your BCEGS scores. These are dollars that we hope no one ever has to get, right? Because these are post-disaster, but it is out there. The big one that I know all of you are aware of and you're keenly interested in is the BRIC program. So this coming up will be the 2nd year for BRIC. Their first year grant awards are still in the works right now, as I think. But your BCEGS score or your average BCEGS score at a state level are relevant to every application for BRIC funding that comes from your state. And it's a point-based system. BRIC's awarded on a point-based system. BCEGS classifications of the sub-applicant get you 15 points in that review process, okay? That's pretty significant. But BCEGS is, the BCEGS score that you're going to want to use is based on the sub-applicant. So that sub-applicant could be a local unit of government, city, town, village, county, could be a quasi-governmental entity. We see a lot of water districts, drainage districts, school districts applying for BRIC funds. And the BCEGS classification of the local community is very, very important to those applications. And these are folks that are applying for grant dollars that may not have any particular influence on what that jurisdiction does from a building code enforcement standpoint. But BCEGS is a measure of the community's commitment to hazard mitigation, right? If the state is the sub-applicant, and which is many times the case for a statewide program. Last year, we used the statewide published averages out of our 2019 National Building Code Assessment Report. This coming cycle, it will be basically, we're going to publish state averages again, and we'll publish them on our website. That's just pending, but it'll be a state average. And as a state hazard mitigation officer, that's a keenly a concern, would be a concern of mine. You know, how does my state average, where's that come out? You know, and what impacts that, right? And if I have code issues in my state, or I have building departments in my state that maybe they're not as funded as well, and their scores are going to become less favorable, I'm going to be concerned about that, because it could potentially impact, you know, a statewide grant application. You know, not saying you wouldn't get the funding, because that's not our decision, but there's 15 points up for grabs here. That is a significant amount of points. Again, this is the National Building Code Assessment Report. We do this every 4 years as a big push. It's still available on the website. If you haven't seen this, I would encourage you to download it, take a look at it. It's all publicly available information. It is really the basis of a conversation to have with local decision makers about building codes. It's very comprehensive. Like I said, every year we'll be publishing now state averages, and then every 4 years we'll put a big report out. And so with that, I mean, if there's anything we found here, if there's anything we've referenced here that you're interested in getting more information on, if you'll email me after the conference call today, we'll make sure and get it to you. And with that, I think, Tom, we're going to turn it over to John and Zach for their presentations.
All right. This is John. Can you hear me? You see me? Okay.
Coming in good.
Good. And my partner Zach is going to tee up our slides. While he does that, I'm just gonna thank Dale right here. And it's not often enough, Dale, that we're together. But I really appreciate when we can do this for the folks that are interested. And really, it's also the men and women behind Dale that are out there in person or virtually talking to most every community in these 45 states, and on a regular basis, 3, 4, 5 years, you know, seeing how that building code administration is going, and measuring the progress and establishing the scores. It's quite an operation. But it is a robust and rich source of data that we tap into some of that. So I'm excited to return to the NHMA webinar series. I think it's almost a year and a half now, where we joined you with our partners at Flash for No Code, No Confidence, that consumer awareness building code campaign, and the launch of that, and the assets that were developed for that, and also the Building Code Saves, FEMA's landmark study that demonstrated the billions that are saved and avoided annual losses every year, and forecasting that out into the future. And it's quite impressive. And now today, coming back to share new policies and programs and direction of the agency to support building codes. So thank you very much. Next slide. So what month is it? Can somebody tell me what month this is? This is my favorite time of the year, every year. I'm biased to this. I'm a former building code official, and also I worked for a builder prior to coming to FEMA. But every year take the thanks, Carl. It's National Building Safety Month, so we take pride in what our building safety professionals do for us each and every day. 41st year, it's impressive. This year, we've got the main themes of prevent, prepare, protect, building codes, save. Building code saves is a pointer to that FEMA study I mentioned. And then here we are in week 4, disaster preparedness. And there's a lot. You can go on the ICC website, and each week is packed with information and resources. But here we are, week 4, and you'll find information about building to the latest codes, preparing your family, protecting your home, benchmarking your community's resilience, and even some PSAs. So I encourage you to go there and visit. Next slide. Something that we're proud of and kind of tops everything off for us is the president has issued a proclamation declaring May as National Building Safety Month. And you'll find it on the White House website under proclamations. It's a very solid proclamation. It points to administration's priorities and agenda. I'll just read a line here. The buildings where we live and work provide an important line of defense against these growing hazards. Investing in our infrastructure and adopting and implementing modern building codes are the most effective mitigation measures communities can undertake. And there's a lot more, and signed by President Biden. So encourage you to take a look at that and share it and send it around. As I mentioned, lots of support, lots of activities. We have FEMA news bulletin articles, we have mitigation minutes. We have something going out to our building science subscribers. There's a blog post, call to action, and then participating events like today. And we did at the ASFPM conference, a couple of building code related events, the Federal Environmental Symposium. Our regions are getting involved. We had a great strategic partners webinar, Region 5. And there's, as I mentioned, there's content at ICC's website. And 2 more events coming up. One is tomorrow, the future of building codes and hazard mitigation, a webinar sponsored by ICC, and FEMA's own Ed Latch and Eric Letvin are part of that panel. And then at the beginning of June, kind of wrapping up Building Safety Month and opening up hurricane season, messaging, myself and Sarah Mulligan from Public Assistance, and we're going to be talking about post-disaster code enforcement. Next slide. Okay, so we have some powerful data-driven information to show you. Feature-packed website, this new building code adoption tracking landing page. Really what this is designed to do is put adoption tracking in your hands, giving you the knowledge and equipping you to act, basically. You'll find lots of fact sheets, the portal itself, regional snapshots and mutual aid snapshots. You can use this every day, and it's updated as often as the data that we get from our partners at ISO. So use it for awareness, use it for strategic actions with code development, and certainly what does the landscape look like post-disaster, where you may need help or you may be in a situation to help others. Then we'll return back just briefly to No Code, No Confidence and show you something about the brand new Inspect to Protect portal. And then we'll talk about some of the features of the new disaster assistance 1206 policy, and then kind of tie a bow on everything, FEMA's first ever agency-wide building code strategy initiative. So next slide, I'm going to turn it to Zach to walk us through some of those static features, and then there's going to be an exciting demo, and I know you're going to love it. So,
hey guys, let me move the screen real quick because there's pop-up notifications. I noticed I don't want them to interrupt the slides, so I'm just transferring it to my other screen real quick.
No worries.
Okay. It let me transfer it, so it's on the same. Hopefully no pop-ups happen. But yeah, so there's a new FEMA BCAT landing page available on FEMA.gov. You'll know you're there when you see nationwide building code adoption tracking at the top, and that will give you an overview of the building code adoption tracking program, also known as BCAT, how it works, the methodology, the glossary and terminology. All this information and more can be found on the landing page. In particular, you can find various BCAT products available on there for download, such as some of the fact sheets we're going to be talking about today, the BCAT fact sheets and the mutual aid fact sheets, MABD fact sheets. The web portal that we're going to show is also accessible through the landing page. And the link for this is shown at the bottom of the slide. It's also easily available through searching, Googling FEMA BCAT building code adoption tracking. And here's a quick look, an overview of the two fact sheet series that are available for download on that landing page. On the left-hand slide is the BCAT fact sheets. We're using Region 4 as an example here. These track building code adoption at the state and territory level. And we have a color-coded regional map on the front page of each fact sheet. And we describe in further detail on the following pages the exact status of the state's building code, as well as its residential code, the IBC and the IRC. We look at whether they adopt current codes, that's 2015 or later edition. We look at whether they weaken those codes for any hazards facing the state. And we also provide a percentage shown over top the state that shows the number of resistant jurisdictions within the state out of all tracked jurisdictions. And a resistant jurisdiction is one that has current codes that are not weakened for any of the hazards present in the state. If you look on page 2, kind of nestled in the back there between front and back, you see Florida. It's colored green on the front map and it's shown in green on the second page, and it's got a nice 99.1% because it's got current codes and it doesn't weaken them. So it's colored green for that reason. If it's 75% or higher, that's considered higher resistance relative to the general distribution of these percentages, and that gets the green color. If it's 25% or lower, that's considered a relatively lower resistance rate, and so that's colored red. If you look on the back page, Tennessee and Mississippi would be examples of that. If it's in between those two ranges, it's colored gray, as Alabama is on the last page back there. On the right-hand side, you see the Mutual Aid for Building Department fact sheets, MABD fact sheets. These function in a similar way to the other ones. They have a regional map on the front. It's color-coded. It has an explanatory legend indicating what those colors mean. But instead of tracking the building code or residential code adoption, it tracks mutual aid laws and regulations in the state or territory. So anything relating to its EMAC, Emergency Management Assistance Compact, which governs interstate sharing of resources after a disaster, as well as its intrastate, or what we often refer to as IMAC, Intrastate Mutual Aid Compact laws governing sharing of resources within the state itself, or say from one county or city to another after a disaster. This is all documented in the fact sheets. And the color coding is based on the type of IMAC system. There's 4 general types. We'll describe them in more detail on a following slide. These also include a section, if you look on the second and third pages here, you can see the sections. We got Connecticut and Maine shown. They're slightly obscured by the first page, but they're shown on the second page here. And there's an EMAC section, IMAC public, IMAC private, and protection section. These 4 sections are described for each state. The EMAC section will tell you to what level has the state or territory expanded its EMAC law beyond the baseline of including government personnel. If they've included private or volunteer sector resources in their EMAC law, that'll be reflected in the EMAC section. The IMAC public describes the type of IMAC system in the state. That's keyed to the color coding in the regional map on the first page. The IMAC private section will describe, similar to the first EMAC section, to what extent has this state or territory expanded its IMAC laws to include private personnel or volunteer personnel. And then there's a protection section, which is related to the last one, which basically shows what legal protections has the state or territory granted to those private or volunteer responders whether they're through the IMAC program or not. Sometimes they're outside of it, but regardless of how they operate, what legal protections exist in the state for such responders. If they specify engineers or architects explicitly in their law, we'll call that out and we'll highlight that by bolding the word, as you can see is the case in 3 situations back here where you see engineers bolded twice, and on the very last page, you see architects bolded, and there's a gray box around that paragraph indicating that those 2 professions are granted explicit protections in the state law. And these are downloadable and accessible at the FEMA BCAT landing page we mentioned a few moments ago, and the link is shown at the bottom. And the FEMA BCAT portal is also available on that webpage. The direct link is shown at the top, but you can get here through the FEMA BCAT landing page. This tracks both building code adoption as well as mutual aid legislation. It's got, I think, about 8 layers, if I'm looking at that correctly, shown at the top, the tabs at the top of the map. And this information will correspond to the information we just saw in those 2 fact sheets, but we'll display it in a more interactive and searchable way for the user, which we'll demonstrate on a later slide. Tracks 5 different hazards, just like the BCAT fact sheets do: flood, hurricane wind, damaging wind, tornado, and seismic. It also has a roll-up layer, the combined hazards layer, which puts all of them together. And it doesn't show it on the slide here, but currently the national resistance rate is 35%. 35% of our BCAT jurisdictions have hazard-resistant codes. We'd like to see that eventually get higher, but the current second quarter data for this year is 35% of jurisdictions. This is updated quarterly. The 2 fact sheets we saw on the last slide are updated annually. And the legend in this map is basically 3 different categories. If they've got current codes that are not weakened, which again is 2015 or later, I codes, that'll be shown in green. If they have older codes than that, or if they've weakened their current codes for any of the 5 hazards we just mentioned, if the hazards exist in the state, then they're colored yellow. If we don't have building code data on that jurisdiction at the moment, it's shown in white. This is at the census jurisdiction level, so it's a little bit more granular than the BCAT fact sheets, which are at the state and territory level. And on the left-hand panel, there's an info tab, which has various other metadata fields pertaining to the jurisdiction, including its, of course, its name and the county it's located in, and the state. It tells you the exact building code edition and residential code edition that they've adopted. You can also get the National Flood Insurance Program CID number and status indicating whether they're participating or sanctioned or not participating. There's also a contact email that takes you to the FEMA Building Science Helpline. If a jurisdiction sees that its information in this map is out of date or inaccurate, they can use that email to send us the correct information, and then we will make the corresponding change in the next update to the map. It also includes other helpful information, such as any links that may exist to the state building code website or building department website, and then adoption notes, which get into very detailed descriptions of the state's current and former building code adoptions and any weakenings that the state has made to the hazards that we mentioned. Mutual aid layers function in a similar way, except they're at the state and territory level, not the census jurisdiction level. And the color coding is a little bit different, and we'll break that down on the next slide. And there's 2 separate layers for EMAC and IMAC. Each one gets its own layer. Here's the IMAC layer, and here's what those colors mean. These match the same colors we saw on the regional map of the MABD fact sheets a few slides ago. So the 4 IMAC categories that we've identified are the statewide opt-out IMAC program. That's where the state creates a statewide mutual aid program and automatically puts all of its jurisdictions into that program by default, and they have to manually exit the program if they don't want to participate. The next one, the light green, is statewide opt-in. That's where the state again creates a statewide program, but they don't automatically put jurisdictions in. The jurisdictions have to manually join the program if they wish to participate. And then in light pink is states that use individual compacts. That's where there is no full statewide system per se, but instead individual jurisdictions within the state enter into mutual agreements with each other on a case-by-case basis or with the state itself. And then there's some states and territories that have no significant mutual aid system at all through compacts or through a statewide system. Those are shown in red. The EMAC layer functions very similarly, but there's only 3 categories here. Most states are at the light green level, standard EMAC legislation. Almost every state and territory participates and is at least at that level. There's only one jurisdiction that we track, one territory in this case, that doesn't participate. That's American Samoa. So they're shown in red. And then there's a few states that go above and beyond the standard level of EMAC by expanding it to include private or volunteer resources. Those are shown in dark green and are designated as enhanced EMAC legislation. A great example of that is Arizona, which has passed a law recently that expands their EMAC to include private and volunteer personnel explicitly, so the governor can deploy them just as easily as he would deploy government responders. And it provides similar legal protections to the private responders as to the government responders. And as we mentioned, this is all coordinated with the fact sheet, so you'd be getting the same information, not contradictory or conflicting information between the fact sheets, and the colors would match too. So what you see on the one is very intuitive to what you would find on the other. And the information is again the same, except you get the EMAC and IMAC together in the fact sheets, whereas in the portal, you either get the IMAC information or the EMAC one, depending on which layer you've clicked on. Oh, and the fact sheets also include references at the bottom, if you notice underneath the red circle, that show where in the state's laws these regulations and laws are found.
Zach,
And here,
in the interest of the time, do you have the 1 minute demo?
for the general one, I've got the 2 minute demo for Louisiana or the 1 minute general demo.
Okay. Yeah. Which one is this in front of us?
This is the 1 minute general.
Okay, yeah. Let's do a little bit of that, and then I'll try to wrap up and see if there's time for questions.
Sure. Yeah. So here's a live example, pre-recorded, but otherwise, live demonstration of what it would look like. You can zoom into whatever state or territory you're interested in, click on the jurisdiction, and just scroll through the metadata that pops up. You can click on a hazard layer. Now, I'll pause it real quick. So you see when you click on the specific hazard, it will load where that hazard exists in the nation. So in the case of seismic shown here, you can see a lot of it out on the West Coast. You got the New Madrid fault zone and a few other pockets in the country. So that not only does it show the building code adoption data, but it will show the hazard areas, the high hazard areas for the selected hazard in the country. You can zoom in again, click on a jurisdiction like we click on Kentucky here. Unfortunately, they've weakened their code for seismic resistance. And if you look at the adoption notes section, you'll get very detailed information on what provisions in the IBC and IRC they've weakened for seismic and a description of what that weakening is. Then the last two layers are the mutual aid ones we talked about. You can click on legend, of course, to get a refresher on what the colors mean at any time. And then otherwise you click on the state or territory you're interested in, and you get all the metadata related to EMAC or IMAC in the left-hand panel. And with that,
that was a whirlwind, but I know as a leave behind, this is going to be a tremendous resource. And I hope all of you will get into it and look at it and give us some feedback. It's amazing what the technology and the data are allowing us to develop and to deliver to all of you. Inspect to Protect has a brand new 2.0 version. That's part of the No Code, No Confidence, and you will see new features coming around this time. It includes the International Building Code. It includes actual disaster history in your area. And also, depending upon the peril, you will see suggested upgrades and indicate the level of impact on your property's protection and estimate the level of cost and code adoption history as well. Another feature-packed website in partnership with Flash and ISO. So please take advantage of that. Next slide. Really quick, and it just in time for hurricane season. Those that administer building codes post-disaster, this will be a big form of assistance directly for building code and floodplain management ordinance administration and enforcement. From the date of disaster, this direct reimbursement for eligible expenses is good for up to 180 days. It covers things like substantial damage, data collection, building safety assessments, permits, code inspections, staff overtime, temporary hires. There's a lot in there. Next slide. But how are you going to use it? How are you going to leverage? You know, we talked about those IMAX and EMAX and mutual aid agreements. You know, what is your plan going forward? You know, start to think about it. Start to consider if you in a situation you needed help, not just the reimbursement, but where the bodies are coming from, or if you're in a position to help others. We want people to start thinking about that. Next slide. So who's eligible? Declared disaster. It's under category G. You have to apply for this in the public assistance grants portal. Documentation is needed. Obviously make these connections now, not wait till the disaster. And what are those assistance teams look like in your state? So just some leading questions, but we hope the portal and those fact sheets are helpful to you. Next slide. And something that we're really proud of is moving us forward as an agency is a building code strategy. Something where together as an agency, we are achieving this vision of a resilient nation with superior building performance. And you know, for the first time, have a strategy that really coordinates and prioritizes FEMA activities when it comes to building codes. Next slide. We're well on our way to producing the strategy this year. We have landed on these 3 goals and the objectives underneath them. So integrating building codes, strengthening nationwide capability, and driving public action. Next slide. Okay. And the future is that the last slide? Okay. Well, we're going to finish the strategy by the end of this fiscal year. An implementation plan will follow. And beyond FEMA, we want to talk to other fellow agencies and get alignment there. And then have a directive that supports all of this. And then when we're ready, work with all of you on a national building code strategy in the coming years. So that's our slides. That's our presentation. Would love to spend another hour with you. But hopefully what we leave behind is going to be useful to you. And here's how to contact us and follow up. Turn it back to NHMA and apologize that we went so long time.
Oh, so it was all good stuff. It all had to be, you know, shown to us. Dale, John, Zach, great stuff today. Dale, you know, as a state hazard mitigation officer, and you know, one that worked with communities putting together the BRIC applications, your organization was fantastic this year, getting us the BCEGS information to, you know, in a short time period. I'm sure we crushed it with the request, but you nailed every one of them, and we got them in on time. So hey, thanks a lot for assisting us in the field on that. And John, Zach, as always, good stuff. You know, stuff that I can see us using, you know, here forward, and you guys, you know, building, you know, more onto this, and getting us the funds under DRRA, you know, the 1206 section, you know, putting the teams together, you know, the EMAC. This is all going to be well worth it here in the future for getting our communities back, you know, better and hopefully at a faster clip. So with that, I know Seppi is with, Dr. Yalda is with Millersville University, and we are using their platform for this series. And Seppi, should we go to those who raised their hands first, or
Sure.
could I ask one question too? Presenters, are you good for another 10 minutes? Could you hang around for another 10? Okay, Let's do it.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm fine.
So Sandra Gunner had her hand up. So Sandra, I'm going to unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question, please.
Seppi, it still shows her on mute.
I see there's one in the Q&A.
Yeah, maybe we can. Yeah, are you able to answer that one? And then I'll.
Yeah, good question. Is the data that the BCAT tool is built upon available for download as a CSV or other metadata file? I'm going to turn to Zach, but what we didn't cover is we want that portal and that data to be utilized and leveraged, and maybe it's in connection with the new NRI, National Risk Index, or maybe it's with the National Mitigation Planning Portal. We're thinking about REST service, and Zach can talk about the way data and platforms can share.
Yeah, we anticipate having a REST service built into the BCAT portal in the near future, which will allow other BCAT portals or any approved third-party portals to automatically pull data from the BCAT portal on a live basis. Like I said, it's updated quarterly. So instead of us having to be manually sharing the layers or someone putting in a data request every quarter or whatever, if they have the REST service, it's just automatically updated as it pulls from the portal as the portal is updated. We can also join our BCAT data in the near future with National Risk Index portal data, so we can link code adoption information on a jurisdiction with its NRI information and start to see how the data plays out together, who's got a high NRI risk and bad building codes, or who's in this hurricane risk zone and also has high social vulnerability, for example. We play with the data in a lot of ways once we join them.
Great question.
Hi, this is Sandra Gunner with the state of Louisiana. I'm the special projects manager for our recovery efforts. We coordinate with our Homeland Security Office. Because of Hurricane Laura and Delta, we formed a data template work group to develop templates for each of the RSFs, the recovery support functions up under the National Disaster Recovery Framework. And we're having a briefing on June 9th of all the respective organizations. FEMA, of course, is critical to that. We have our State GIS Council, and then we have NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which have developed a process for assessing risk by disasters. It also seems that we need to add this in, particularly for our infrastructure RSF, because it would address the risk of buildings specifically, along with some of the other generic data that we would collect. I did take down all of the portals, but is my assumption on this correct, that this could be another layer of data that we could collect in advance, as well as to look at addressing what we need to do in terms of our building codes and a CRS in the future?
Sandra, I like the way you're thinking. It's great, exciting to hear about this work that you're doing. And Zach and I would like to give you a personal demo of what the portal is showing and all the rich data specifically for Louisiana. And just to your point of where they're strong with, say, hurricane codes, or maybe not so much with flood codes. So please follow up with us, and we'll be happy to do that and make that connection.
Thank you, definitely will.
Yeah, there's a lot of focus and attention, right, on climate adaptation, climate change, delivering government programs and grants to, in an equitable fashion. So when you start, it becomes really interesting. NRI, population data, even the nation's where housing starts. We're at a peak of close to 1.8 million new housing starts annually. And so are these going in areas with strong codes and underserved communities? What does the code look like? So it becomes a very rich data set to weave together and start to tell stories. We're very excited about the potential applications.
Thanks. And I see another question. I don't know if you can unmute Rebecca Jones, Seppi, on there, but there's a question in the chat about guidance on leveraging, consulting engineer architects prior to event, and mentioning the strategy with Sandy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention other partners here that have disaster response networks. The AIA has a vast network connecting architects. And what's important to understand is how they would be used, either as volunteers to be able to be reimbursed, or just volunteer their time, and what the protections are for them when they're performing. And as well as the International Code Council has their disaster response network. So those are great sources to connect with. And then, yes, spread the word. You know, consulting engineers, architects in your communities, in your state, are they plugged in, or can they be part of a volunteer workforce to help out post-disaster?
Seppi, regarding the providing the slides, we can do that. I'm gonna have to. They were rather large slides, so I'm gonna go ahead and PDF them and send them on. If Dale and John are okay with that.
Absolutely. I'm seeing
Okay.
a question from Tina about focus on developing hazard mitigation plans, and that's another area you want to look at. You know, the strength and the status of mitigation plans and the underlying building codes and their level of disaster resistance. So we like what you're thinking about, and really, if it's an opportunity to update mitigation plan, you know, not only look at the hazards and the strategies, but see if there's a section on building codes and what are the risk reduction measures and techniques that are addressing those hazards and risks. And in the past, maybe that section or that content was not as rich or as robust, but we're providing platforms and data like this, and so there's a lot that you can bring in and add to enhance those mitigation plans. Great question. Building code concerns in rural areas. Great question there too. You know, perhaps these are areas that there's varying degrees of development. And so how do they handle those types of needs? Do they themselves enter into agreements at a county level or some other third party? But also we've been talking with USDA and their rural communities program and seeing what the connection points and what could be ways to deliver technical assistance through USDA rural communities programs. Thanks for the question.
Seppi, did we run through all the questions? Did we get the questions answered or any more that we didn't see?
I believe all have been addressed. There was just several questions about the ability to download the slides and access the recording. So those have been addressed. But I believe Aaron was about to speak. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
No, that's what I was going to say. I saw a lot of questions around, you know, the panelists and the presentations and that being available. It will be on nhma.info, the recording of this presentation today. And just appreciate everyone being on.
Absolutely.